Hey everyone, Adam here. So was your podcast. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Jaret Martino. He's a director, writer, creator of a new movie called Donna, Stronger Than Pretty. The review for the movie is already up. The movie is available now on VOD. I highly recommend it. It's a very well made movie, well crafted, well acted. But talking to Jaret, it's a very personal movie too. Jaret Martino is the son of Donna Martino, who the movie Donna Stronger Than Pretty is based on. It's her story. He's in it. I mean, he cast himself as a kid in it. He lived through this. It could not be more personal to him, and he does a fantastic job of being objective and telling his mother's story. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with Jaret Martino. Jaret, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. You have a movie that we did watch for the podcast. The reviews out there, Donna, the full title Donna, Stronger Than Pretty. And this is a very personal story for you. So I was really interested to talk to you to see how that came about. But before we get there, I kind of wanted to ask how you got into film.
Sure. Yeah, I started as an actor, and I was raised by a single mom, so she would look for free things to do, and that's very much part of the story. We would go to the theater, and I just turned to her. I think as kids, you still really understand what's going on emotionally, even if you don't fully grasp the situation. So I just turned to her at the theater one day and said, "That's what I want to do when I grow up, and I'm going to buy you a gold house." So it was like this, big kid's dream, and so I've done everything to just make it happen. The same strength and determination my mom always showed. I just kind of used that to press forward. And so yeah, I started as an actor and then started producing about 8 years ago.
Oh, great. Okay. And you were New York City based at the time when you got into it?
I was, yeah. I grew up in Long Island, New York, and then worked in and out of the city, um, and then made the move to LA like 10 years ago.
Okay. So I'm guessing you started more on stage than on screen.
I did, yeah. So it was all like community theater, local theater, off Broadway, off Broadway. So yeah, it was mostly the theater, which was such a good training to have. Everything that's live is I don't want to say harder, but just takes a different skill set. So it really prepared me um, for film and TV.
Okay. And how did you make the leap from actor to producer and then to director?
Yeah, so I was going to Studio 4, which James Franco owned at that point, and all the lovely women over there, like Kathleen Randazzo was one of my coaches. I was also going to Larry Moss at the same time, so very much concentrating on my acting. But as the industry started to shift, um, we were encouraged as actors to make our own content. So I did. I started with a documentary called Driven. And then just innately, I was drawn towards women's empowerment stories because of my mom's background and being a single parent. So I really always had such an admiration for that, and also just being a young guy in Hollywood and really feeling the impact of like, oh wow, my mom, she did a lot, because all I had to do in one day was go on a couple of auditions and do my laundry. And I was like having a difficult time with that when I
Right.
first got out here, because it was, the first time really being an adult that way. And anyway, so my appreciation grew that much more because I was like, wow, she really juggled 2 to 3 jobs while going to school full time and becoming a teacher. Um, so it was at that point that I started to cross over from actor to production, and I've made I think 18 or 19 films prior to making Donna the feature. So I was really heavily involved with production. It kind of took over my life. I did some acting in between, but then yeah, Donna was my leap into to directing.
Okay. So
And
go ahead.
yeah, so that was definitely the big leap. And I was set on hiring a woman to direct, because it is primarily women's empowerment story. However, I just didn't find, I don't want to say the right fit, but everybody wanted to stamp their own pain, their own story on it. Um, so, I think typically that can work really well for a story that's not based on truth, and that wasn't surrounding my mother's story. I was really, really set on it being exactly how I grew up and not feeding into any stigmas or stereotypes, or taking away from just like her gentle strength. Because as we showcase in the film, like she's writing, journal writing, because she really didn't have her voice for so long. Just who she was naturally, she was just a more quiet, timid woman. And then, just who she was conditioned to be by society, growing up in these time periods that didn't allow and didn't encourage women to flourish.
Yeah, you did a really good job establishing that in the movie. Like your opening scene is very young Donna, and her parents don't really say this is a woman's place, but that short introduction really set the stage as to, oh, that's the mentality going on in her world.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks for recognizing that. I felt like it was an important part to keep in, because covering 30 years in a film is a tremendous job, for all departments. But yeah, that piece, my grandmother still tells me till this day, like in her time, if a woman was hit in the neighborhood and in Brooklyn, the first thing they would ask her is, well, what did you do to him? What did you do to make this happen? And I think that mentality is still something, although we've come so far as a society, in a lot of ways, we're still ingrained in that psyche. I mean, and it's thousands of years before that, that women were less than, they were looked down upon. They were looked at almost as slaves in a way. So, I think that this film will be, and is, like, it's a controversial piece, because it's bringing out who kind of still is set in those ways and who's ready to move forward. So I was always ready for like a 50-50 split of, this is some really deep stuff that can bring up a lot for people, and that's okay. I'm happy that it's doing that, because sometimes it takes these hard conversations to move forward, to get to a place as a society. Film has that beautiful way of creating giant ripple effects, and that's really like what keeps me inspired and motivated and going in the film business, because you can have these effects where the lives, their course of their life changes just by seeing one moment out of film, never mind just the whole entire film. But so yeah, it's interesting.
That is a good thing to bring up too, that there might be some uncomfortable conversations that come of it, but they're important conversations. And watching it, it didn't occur to me. I mean, not that I, live in a bubble and I was oblivious that people still live this way, but like you said, the times probably haven't changed as much as maybe they should.
Yeah, I mean, and I think when you're doing, the work, and it wasn't made to shame anybody or to be, it really, we wanted to gently point out even the violence. Like, I didn't want to feed into like how a lot of media capitalizes on the pain, on those moments, those Hollywood moments. I didn't make this to appease Hollywood. I don't make any of my work to appease anybody. It's really to create the awareness. We're proud partners with the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and I've been on the ground floor of that work, pushing for legislature and like all these things, and meeting these women and men. This isn't just, even though it's focused on women's empowerment, this is a man's story as well. This does happen to men. There's all different types of abuse, whether it be verbal, emotional, physical, financial. So meeting these women Um, and people that have come up to my mom, you know, we were at the Indie Lounge at Sundance, and I'll never forget. Um, this man came up to my mom and was in tears and just wanted to shake her hand. This is pre-pandemic, and he just poured his heart out and said, you know, I wish my grandmother had the courage you did, because she would be here today. And you know, those are bone chilling moments. Those are things that stick with you. And it was those aha moments that I was like, you know what, we have to make the feature. We have to make this short go further, because it can save lives. And we've seen that proof through the short that went worldwide. And I'm sure, you know, the same thing will happen with the feature, which I'm really, really grateful for. My mom did also pass away on September 3rd of pancreatic cancer. So this film is also her legacy. It's part of her legacy. And, you know, 8 years, we got to spend a lot more time together through making this, and you know, the fact that I can showcase and share her strength and determination with the world is really important for me personally right now, just to be able to have something, a vehicle to continue talking about my mom, you know, because I think a lot of times when we lose people, you just go inside and you want to close off. And it's really easy to do that, you know, because who wants to talk about these, you know, heavy things and these things that make us feel so many, like a myriad of emotions. So yeah, that's been, you know, people like you and all the press things I've been doing, like being able to sit down and do this is helping me too right now personally. Just share our life story and why it's important for people to honor themselves, because you know, you can't get those years back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, sorry to hear about your loss. I am glad that she got to see you finish the movie and that you got to go to Sundance, that it didn't come out last year for film festivals, and you know, maybe you got to do a couple of digital things. I'm glad you got to go out and tour with her on such a personal story.
Yeah, we did that with the short film, and then for the feature, I actually got to sit next to her twice. We were at in East Hampton at Guildhall for a really beautiful event there, and then we were at a theater in Huntington. So this was all prior. We didn't really get to do much of the festivals because of the pandemic, and then shortly after she was sick, but she was at the premiere in Santa Monica. So yeah, I mean, those are moments I'll cherish the rest of my life, that she got to be there for. So
for sure, yeah. When you were first coming up with the idea for the movie, because you had done a short first, I don't want to say the same story in like a diminishing way, but that it was her story, right? Driven.
Yeah, it was the same story. Yeah.
So when you got the idea to do the feature, was it kind of daunting? Like, how much deeper did you have to dig to see that side, like to kind of get an objective look at someone who raised you?
It was it's unlike anything else that I've ever been through. You know, I was reliving vivid memories. And then this was my mom's journals. So we used her journals, and then it was a lot for me. It was really heavy. And luckily we hired a co-writer from the WGA, Pat Branch, who spent a lot of time with my mom on the phone and spent a lot of time with our cast. We've had the stars of the cast and some of the supporting since the stage reading, which I'm really proud of. That rarely happens in this business, that people are kept on board, you know. So that's, you know, that makes me really proud. But yeah, it was a wild experience and a healing one, because again, like I was, you know, putting myself right in the line of fire of reliving this stuff. That said, it was important for me because I got to reframe throughout that time. Like I was re-experiencing it, but in a really safe way.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like going to like 100 years of therapy, and you know, in a really compact time.
Right.
So that was like, so you know, that was a blessing in disguise. but yeah, it was definitely something that, it led to our partnership with the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And my mom and I sat with the CEO, Ruth Glenn, and she interviewed my mom before we both spoke at the conference. And that was another moment I'll never forget, because Ruth sat there and took in our story and heard us out, and why we're making this movie. And it was right before we spoke to thousands of advocates that are at their annual conference. And Ruth allowed us our time, and then turned around and said she was a victim at one point too. And we're survivors. We're all survivors. Her ex-husband shot her 3 times and left her for dead. And that was another moment that was just like, it's jaw dropping. Like, here we are sitting with this woman and she publicly tells her story a lot, and shares that because it helps people see that they're not victims anymore, that they're survivors. And that was the biggest thing for my family and I. This film helped us see that, because you can even get out of a situation and go on and flourish in a way, but you could still have traces of being a victim and utilizing that in your mentality. So it really helped us move forward through that as well, which unfortunately, a lot of people don't get that opportunity in this lifetime.
Yeah, that's a whole side of it that I hadn't fully considered, is that you had the kind of pain of reliving it, as you were saying, and digging up the past, but also like you said, 100 years of therapy in a span of months to maybe a couple years. But it's a really fascinating thing to try to wrap my head around, having not had your experiences and not made the movie. Of course, it's just a lot to take in. It's really impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a huge part of the reason why I'm here on this earth, to say, hey, like, you can do it too, and it's not your fault. I think that I'm making sure I say that in every interview, because society has and the press, unfortunately, has a way to, put everything in these boxes and discount a lot of what we're talking about. So again, thanks for just opening the floor and being a man that's coming to the table to say, this needs to be talked about. We need to discover, the intricate details here. Because again, it's going to take men to talk about domestic violence. And that's a big part of my work too. As I stood in front of thousands of women at the NCADV conference, I had to, before I went into my prepared speech, I just said, where are all the men? I'm in a room full of thousands of women and a handful of men that care and are advocating for change. And to me, it's the domestic violence is the root issue. We'll never fully see the potential of Me Too and Time's Up and movements that care, because the root is domestic violence. It's what we are conditioned, at home. It starts at home. I learned that from my mom, because she was a teacher, and she saw it on a daily basis. Kids are shaped by their home life, and they act and react accordingly. So yeah, it's just there's so much. It's hard to give clear, concise answers with this topic, because it's so rooted. It's so deep rooted.
Right. Yeah, and you've lived it your whole life, so I'm sure you have a lot to say.
Yeah, and especially with the film and meeting like all these people and hearing stories on a daily basis. We have worldwide traffic now to Donna the movie and StrongerThanPretty.com, because it's a worldwide issue. People feel, domestic violence is still as much of an issue as it was in 1950. That's just there's just thankfully more resources today. Resources that my mom didn't have, like shelters and food programs and these different things that communities have come together to establish.
For sure. And that was an interesting thing too in the movie when she made the decision to act. Um, she was really, like you said, on her own. She didn't go to a government sponsored agency to get help or go and stay. There even seemed to be some people in the movie who were like, oh, well, maybe give it another shot. Like it was fascinating to see the people around. I mean, I'm talking about the character, but it's based on your mom. So um, I just don't want you to think I'm downplaying anything.
Oh no, it's okay.
It was just sorry.
I'm so used to my life that had, it, in a way, has become a business. The film has become it's independent, and I've separated enough from my own life that.
Okay, yeah, I just thought it was interesting that you portrayed that side of it too. That she's making the decision to act, which is already difficult, but that decision just means like you're in open water on your own. Bring your kids with you and keep your head up.
Yeah, and that's part of the financial abuse, because part of the story is that my father was running a very, very successful business still till this day, and and the courts mandated like $50 a month per child, and even I'm not that old, so that doesn't put food on the table every month,
Right.
But when you roll up to court in a Porsche and have the best attorney. And then my mom had a state appointed attorney. It makes things really difficult. And when when you're a woman that wasn't encouraged to follow your dreams and go to school, to become a school teacher early on, that created a whole separate issue, because now she was a woman that, like most in her day, was encouraged to find a man and have your children. So this mentality, this conditioning of society, has set women up for situations like this, for failure, for a really rough time when making that the great escape. Because like in the film, a lot of women are told, countless times I've heard that they're threatened, their lives are threatened. So when you leave, when you use your voice, the very next thing is, I'll kill you before you ever leave. And we see it in the news. Sometimes that means the mother and all the children. And that's a part of domestic, very much part of domestic violence, that it becomes a serious issue of, a life-threatening one.
For sure, yeah. Where did you get the tagline or the subtitle "Stronger Than Pretty"?
So just on the production team, we all worked together, and it was just like kind of it was kind of what was said to my mom without saying those words, I guess. It was an easy phrase to the collective spirit kind of what we were getting at and what it took for her, because she was a really, really beautiful woman. And people always wanted to put her in a box and category because of that. Well, you're too pretty for that job. Like my mom, I remember when she was younger, she wanted to, her side of the family, her dad owned a road construction company, and she wanted to be a flag girl, and he was like, no, you can't, I'm not putting you in that job, and you're too pretty for that job. So it was interesting. It was interesting to watch this woman with so much strength and determination, to do, in her heart, she knew everything was possible. She knew that she was capable, but she was constantly told in every area. And that's what I wanted to cover too. I didn't want to just pinpoint a man, and blame it all on a marriage. Because it really was like, it's a societal issue in terms of, in the workplace and everything else. So.
Yeah, I thought you did a good job setting that up too. Like we talked a little about the opening scene, but also given the tagline "Stronger Than Pretty," so often in the movie, even a friend would say, "Oh, you're so pretty," but it wasn't it wasn't lifting her up at all. It was almost like an insult when somebody said it, even though that wasn't quite the intention. It was this weird line you walked, and I think you really nailed it in the script, that it was just all of these links in the chain that society was using to try to keep her chained down.
Yeah, I mean, and it feels good in the moment, right? I mean, anybody, like if you hear, oh, you're good looking, it boosts your ego, but ego only lasts, or so long. So it's like, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. That was definitely something we were going for. That, and your looks are only going to carry you a certain amount of time too, right? That's
Yeah.
why my mom buckled down, and she knew, like, if I'm going to make a life for myself and my kids, like, she waitressed, she cleaned houses, and she went to school full time, and she would laugh because, becoming a public school teacher takes just about as much time. Like, by the time you finish your master's and everything else you went through, it's like 10, 12 years of school. Like, I should have been a doctor.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, she lived her dream. That was her dream, though. So ever since she was a little girl, so she got to live that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How did you go about casting the movie? Because I think the cast was a lot, and given that you were casting your mother, yourself, your father, like, it's really personal casting.
Yeah, we got really, really lucky. Like I said, we had the stars and some of the supporting on from the stage reading. So that was, God, like 7 years ago now. So they just really grew with the project and went through all the rewrites with us. And the stage reading is not something like that's very common nowadays. So we actually had like a really big stage reading where they went out to the industry and there was an invite, and we did it right at the Fountain Theater, which gave us, a tremendous amount of notes and like where we wanted to take the story, to just see it out, to see it play out, and then to see the audience reactions was really important. So yeah, we had them from the stage reading.
Okay. It's interesting. Just the thought of, like, now I'm going to meet a bunch of actresses to cast my mother. Now I'm going to meet a bunch of actors to cast me as a child. I'm not asking a lot of filmmaking questions because I'm just so fascinated by, you could not be closer to this project.
Yeah, it was definitely, it was interesting. And, I knew Kate Amundsen was our Donna, like almost as soon as she walked in. She almost didn't have to read, in my eyes and my heart, because she just had her mannerisms, her gentle strength, and her beauty. She looked a lot like my mom when she was younger, and it just all was there. And I think kind of the stars aligned. I think for a lot of feature films like this that can have a ripple effect, something bigger takes over. I did put a ton of energy into it, and really made sure that it moved forward. But with that said too, just like the universe wanted this to happen, because it can change lives. So yeah, she stepped through that door, and I just knew. And then Anthony was a referral, Anthony Fico, who plays Nick, and they just worked really well, and I loved their chemistry, and they really understood the project, and they became an extended family. They met my mom at the stage reading, and we kind of had this epic journey of being in all these really neat places together.
Yeah, the two leads you had who played your mother and father did really good at, there's a lot of emotional weight and everything, obviously, but it was never, he's a slime ball from the get-go and she's meek from the get-go. There was a lot of, like, you could see why they got together. Like, the guy who plays your father had some charm to him. Even when you didn't like him, you're like, oh, I see why she got with this guy when she did, and carried it through. So it was really nice to play the subtleties instead of, hero villain.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the complicated part about any domestic violence situation, that, the first question, which feeds into the stereotypes and stigmas, why didn't you leave?
Mm-hmm.
But it's because simply, and not so simply, there was love there, that there was a tremendous love, like the love of your life. So walking away in that situation normally isn't easy for a lot of people. But then add the layers of having children and being abused without really, it happens subtly. It's not like all of a sudden someone's just like smacking you across the face. It starts with these verbal and emotional manipulative comments.
Yeah, it did have like a slow ramp up, and then when she decided to make her move, it kind of it was. I just really appreciated the subtlety, so it wasn't, you're not beating the audience over the head with it. We know what we're in for. You told the believable version of the story, which I was really impressed by.
Thank you. Yeah, we definitely wanted this to be a tool, for other people, and demonstrate that it isn't an overnight process. Some movies want to feed into that, and I walked away from those deals, to be quite honest. The people that wanted to give Donna a gun, make it the Hollywood version, or
Oh yeah.
J-Lo in Enough, where she becomes this like all-star karate champ. It's like
Yeah.
there's no time for that for a lot of women, and um, and good for the people that do that, but that wasn't my mom's story.
No, for sure. Yeah, you have to stick to your guns when you're doing that. She can't put on the cape and fly away.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as much as I think as much as like some, the audience might feel moments of that, like, go now, what are you doing? I
Yeah.
wanted that to be present because for people out there that are going through the situation, they'll feel that. They'll use that and be like, they'll feel seen, they'll feel heard. And it will be one of the first times for a lot of women and men that are in this situation that are depicted quite like this.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Without it going to one extreme or the other, and not focusing on the violence and not making it overly brutal. I think playing the subtlety is underrepresented in movies that deal with this subject.
Definitely. It's easy, it's an easy thing to feed into, because it's what people are used to cashing in on.
Mm-hmm. It's almost what audiences expect, is to see the sensationalized, insane version.
Yeah, and none of my work, none of that's present because it's really heart-centered and not rooted in ego and here to create change.
Mm-hmm.
So if I fed into any of that, I would just be another filmmaker trying to make a buck.
Yeah, and I like that you bring that up too, because that's what I like about watching more independent movies than studio sometimes is, I'll watch Marvel movies. I love that stuff. Fine. But here's your formula. The director's pretty much insignificant. It's interchangeable. You have your voice. You're going to tell your story. You could have told that Hollywood story where she gets a gun and blows them away and they ride off into the sunset in the convertible, but anyone could tell that story because it's not a real story.
Exactly. Yep.
So it's great you got to do it your way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely. It took a lot of bravery, and it took some heartache of walking away from deals, and not going the easier route of selling out,
Yeah.
But I'm truly grateful, even more so today, that this really is a part of my mom's legacy, and that I have that, and I'll have that forever. So it's that's way more important to me than even how well this movie does in terms of Hollywood standard. And like I said earlier, it's really, for me, knowing if we changed one life, if one woman or man walked away from their situation, then I did my job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm hoping you get some traction with it, because it's very well made. I mean, I know we didn't talk a lot about the technical aspects of it being a movie, but I wanted to get your story because this is so your story. It was less important what kind of camera to shoot on, how'd you do the editing, because it's interesting to me, but this is such a unique opportunity that I wanted to get your story out there the best we could.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think the PR agency mentioned that you're talking to Kate on Wednesday, I believe. So
yeah,
she could fill you in more on on that stuff. And her dad was the editor, so that was another.
Oh,
really,
awesome! I'll have to bring that up. Yeah, thank you.
yeah, this was truly a family affair. So, and her dad's a longtime editor, and I learned a tremendous amount from Michael Almondson. He really cool stories about his days back in Paramount when he'd carry these, huge film reels across, the lot, and they were editing on film still. So just to work with a veteran like that who, has such a wealth of experience was an incredible learning experience.
For sure, yeah. And just because we didn't get into the technical stuff of the movie, just for people listening, it is very well made technically. Like when you change eras, you nail it. It never feels like you're in a back room with just four walls to avoid shooting New York City. Like you're always in the timeline. Like it was very well done. It's very well edited. It looks great. So just for people listening who haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I really I'm a big fan of John Mark Valley, Big Little Lies and Wild. The way he kind of like makes this setting become a character. I really wanted to juxtapose the background, our setting, our locations with the grittiness of the story, because New York has like so much beauty to offer, especially a Long Island summer, which is when we shot. So we had a really fun time capturing all that. And what's cool is we created this time capsule, because a lot of those things aren't there anymore, like some of the storefronts and even like some of the locations held off on changing the wood cedar shakes on the front of their house to now they have vinyl. And they did that specifically for the movie. Like I was like, we have to make this because I'm holding up this guy's construction, But yeah, I mean, that was the other part about the film. Like it was such a community effort too. Like so many people came on board, and I think a big part of that was that maybe they didn't share it with us, but or they might have shared a little something, like brushed upon it, but they resonated with the story and they wanted to be a part of it. We had a cast and crew of over 200 people, and then when you add in all the the favors and the cars and the locations, and it was a tremendous first feature to accomplish.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this was your first feature-length movie, and like you swung for the fences. You cover what, 3 decades of very distinct style changes and car changes, and
I know. I'm like, next time I am gonna shoot in 4 walls and just like have 2 actors and
right. Do some intense conversations, and that's that.
Exactly. But it was fun. I wouldn't change it for the world. And
oh no, you nailed it. It came out great. So why don't you tell everybody, I know you have another appointment, so I don't hold you up too much longer. Why don't you tell everybody when and where they can get their hands on Donna?
Yeah, Donna, the movie is out now. It's Donna Stronger Than Pretty. And all the links of where it's available, it's streaming on over a dozen platforms through Gravitas Ventures. And all the links are on donnathemovie.com or strongerthanpretty.com. It's on Apple TV, iTunes, Amazon, Fandango, and like I said, like a dozen other platforms. So yeah, check it out and leave us some feedback. And we also have a Get Help page. That's an important thing to let the audience know, that if you are in this situation, if you know somebody, we have a Get Help page on donnathemovie.com, and it has 24/7 hotline available, and links to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and resources. We're partners with thousands of advocates across the nation, so there's help out there. It's not your fault, and just reach out. We're here to support. We're more than a movie. This is about the movement, and this is about saving lives.
Absolutely. I love that you're doing that. That's really nice to add on to your movie.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, you're awesome, and thanks for
thanks.
taking the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. It was really great talking to you.
You as well. Have a great day. Thanks.
You too. Much. I wanted to thank Jaret one more time for coming on to talk about this. He's a true pro. The movie looks great as far as the movie goes, but also to be able to be objective and to talk about this tough subject matter with such poise is awesome. And I love that he's using the movie to spread the word and raise awareness of domestic abuse and try to do something about it. It's a great way to pour yourself into a project and also contribute to the wider world beyond entertainment. It was a great interview. I really enjoyed it. Check out Donna, Stronger Than Pretty, available now on VOD. Also, please be sure to check out So Was Her Podcast every single week wherever you get your podcasts. SoWasHerPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, merchandise, and more. So Was Her Podcast also has a Patreon page where for as little as $1 a month you can get multiple monthly bonus shows. We have a ton more of this kind of coverage coming, movies, interviews, everything. So please remember to subscribe to our channel. You're not going to want to miss out. And we love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments, leave us something on social media. All the accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal level, I released a comic book this year. The first issue came out in January. We're doing an issue a month. They're available at socialstudiescomic.com. I'd appreciate if you checked it out or checked us out on social media. Thanks.